when university officials sat down with a resident director and asked, on record, exactly how many noise complaints had been filed. The answer they received exposed a system that had failed one student so completely she had been sleeping in her car for a week straight. What happened next took less than 24 hours. Here's the full story. Somewhere in Texas, a college student signed a housing contract, a legally binding agreement promising her a safe, livable space in exchange for thousands of dollars in housing fees. Like most students, she didn't read the fine print. She trusted the institution. That trust would cost her weeks of sleep and, ultimately, her academic standing. We'll call our student Alex. She moved into her dorm room at the start of the semester with every expectation of a normal college experience. Early classes, late study sessions, the usual adjustment. Her roommate, however, had a very different idea of what dorm life looked like. And no one in authority seemed to think that was their problem to solve. The roommate was loud, not ordinary college loud. We're talking late-night guitar sessions, singing, full-volume gaming, phone calls at 2, 3, 4 in the morning every night. Students in adjacent rooms were filing their own complaints. And night after night, Alex lay awake, her grades quietly bleeding out from sheer exhaustion. By the time she posted her story online, she had already spent 7 consecutive nights sleeping in her car in a campus parking lot. Now, before we go any further, I want to stop and do something this channel always does. We are going to look at every angle. Because in disputes like this, there is almost always more than one side worth examining. And the easy villain is rarely the whole story. From Alex's perspective, this was a slow-motion catastrophe. She had done everything right. She had approached her roommate directly multiple times. She had filed complaints with her resident advisor, then escalated to the resident director. She had tried earplugs, white noise machines, nothing worked. And every time she asked for a room reassignment, she was told the same thing: the dorm is overfull. There is nowhere to put you. You are on your own. From the roommate's perspective, we have no direct record, and that matters. It's entirely possible she didn't fully grasp the impact she was having. It's possible the gentle, consequence-free reminders from housing staff gave her no real signal that anything was seriously wrong. When authority figures respond to disruptive behavior with a polite ask and nothing more, they are functionally telling the disruptor, this is acceptable. That's not the roommate's fault. That's a structural failure. And then there's the university. The resident advisor knew, the resident director knew. Multiple complaints had been filed, not once, not twice, but repeatedly over weeks. Each time, the institutional response was identical: ask her to be quieter. No formal documentation. No disciplinary referral. No alternative housing arranged. Just words that dissolved into the air and changed nothing. What would you do if the people responsible for your safety kept giving you the same ineffective answer? Drop that in the comments. Here is the detail that should give every parent and student watching this pause. Alex was told repeatedly that the dorm was overfull and a room change was impossible. But the moment university leadership got involved, a room was found within 24 hours. Not for Alex, for her roommate. That asymmetry is not an administrative coincidence. It is a statement about whose discomfort the institution was willing to prioritize, and it speaks volumes. Let's talk about the legal framework here, because this is not simply a roommate dispute. This is a contract matter. When a student pays for university housing, they are entering into a binding legal agreement. At Texas public universities, annual on-campus housing costs range from approximately $8, $400 to $13, $800 depending on the institution and room type. That is not a donation. That is a fee for a service, and the service includes a habitable living environment. That contract carries with it a legal concept called the implied covenant of quiet enjoyment. Quiet enjoyment, that's a formal legal term, means a tenant has the right to use their leased space without unreasonable interference. It doesn't mean silence. It means the landlord cannot allow conditions that make the space unusable. Universities acting as housing providers are generally bound by this principle under landlord-tenant law. When they knowingly fail to act on documented interference, they may be in breach of that covenant. There's a second doctrine relevant here: constructive eviction. Constructive eviction, pay attention to this one, occurs when a landlord's failure to address uninhabitable conditions effectively forces a tenant to leave, even without any formal notice or legal order. Alex sleeping in her car for 7 consecutive nights is not a metaphor. Under the eyes of landlord-tenant law, it is constructive eviction in its most literal form. She had been pushed out of housing, she was legally entitled to occupy, and was actively paying for. Alex's turning point came when she stopped trying to solve the problem through the people who had already failed her, and instead escalated to the Dean of Student Affairs. This is the move that changed the entire trajectory, because the Dean's office is not an RA. They are not a resident director. They have institutional authority, formal investigative protocols, and, critically, the ability to create an official record that follows both parties. When the Dean's office opened a formal inquiry, one of the first things they did was sit down with the resident director and ask a direct question. How many times had complaints about this roommate been filed? The resident director had to answer, on record. And whatever that answer was, it revealed the full scope of institutional inaction in a way that could no longer be minimized or dismissed. This is why documentation matters. Paper trails have weight that verbal assurances never will. The university then initiated what amounts to a formal housing conduct proceeding. Think of this as the institutional parallel to a civil hearing. Evidence was laid out. The timeline of complaints was reviewed. The pattern of inadequate response by housing staff was now visible as a documented whole rather than isolated incidents. For the first time in this ordeal, someone with actual authority to compel change was paying close attention. And here is where this case delivers its most striking moment. After weeks of stonewalling, after 7 nights in a parking lot, after countless conversations that went nowhere, the roommate was given exactly 1 day to pack her belongings and vacate the room. 24 hours. The institution that had told Alex there was no room available, no solution possible, no recourse, found a solution the moment leadership was directly accountable for not finding one. Alex came back from class that afternoon. She opened her dorm room door. The room was quiet. Every piece of her roommate's belongings was gone. The guitar, the gaming setup, the noise, all of it. For the first time since the semester began, she had a space she could actually use. That night, she slept in a bed for what she described as the first time in forever. Let's be precise about what the university's decision actually represents. In legal terms, moving the roommate constitutes an acknowledgement, however implicit, that the prior housing conditions violated the institution's own duty of care. By acting swiftly once the dean was involved, the university demonstrated that the remedy had always been available. They had simply chosen not to deploy it until the cost of inaction exceeded the cost of action. But here is the question this case leaves unanswered, and it matters. Where was the roommate placed? Was a conduct notation added to her student record? Is another student now in the same situation Alex was in, with no idea what the housing history of their new roommate looks like? If the university simply shuffled the problem to a different room without any formal consequence, then the resolution Alex received was personal justice, but not systemic change. For universities watching cases like this one, the legal exposure is real. Courts in multiple jurisdictions have held that a university acting as a residential landlord bears an affirmative duty to maintain habitable conditions. A documented pattern of inadequate response to noise complaints, especially one that results in a student abandoning their assigned housing, is precisely the kind of record that supports a constructive eviction claim. Alex's case is not an outlier, it is a warning. 7 nights in a car is not a minor inconvenience to be footnoted. Sleep deprivation at that duration is clinically significant. It impairs cognitive function, academic performance, immune response, and mental health. Alex noted her grades had already dropped by the time she escalated. Those are real, measurable harms. Had she chosen to pursue this through a formal legal complaint or small claims proceeding, those damages would have had a dollar value attached to them. Alex's final update was short. She wrote that she finally got a full night's sleep, the first time in what felt like forever. That one sentence, tucked at the end of a Reddit thread, carries more weight than any legal analysis I can offer. She got her room back. She got her sleep back. What she still hasn't gotten, and what no one has addressed, is whether the institution that failed her for weeks has changed a single policy because of it. So here's the question I want to leave you with, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. If you were Alex, weeks into this, grades dropping, sleeping in your car, at what point would you have escalated to the dean? Would you have known that was an option? Because I think a lot of students watching this right now are in a similar situation, quietly enduring something fixable, because no one told them which door to open. If you're dealing with a housing dispute at a university or anywhere else, the single most powerful thing you can do is build a paper trail from day one. Write down every complaint. Note the date, the time, the name of every person you spoke to, and exactly what they said. Keep copies. Send follow-up emails after verbal conversations so there is a written record. Paper trails win cases. Verbal assurances disappear. That documentation is what forced Alex's university to act, and it can do the same for you. If this breakdown was useful, subscribe, because next week we're covering a family court case out of Florida where a single text message, sent at 11 p.m., became the pivotal piece of evidence that flipped a custody ruling entirely. That one is not to be missed.